Okay, now we're ready to start adding some movement to our car. So to do that, we're going to have to write a script to control the car. So down here in our assets again, I'm going to right click, go to create, and I'm going to create a C# script. And I'm going to name it car. Once you have created it and named it, you can see that it's kind of loading everything into the scene now. It has to do a lot of things behind the scenes so that the script is now usable. Now I can double click on it and it should open in Visual Studio Code. So each script that we write will look something like this. What we see up here at the top, this is importing some different libraries that we're going to need to be able to use with Unity Engine, Unity Games. Then we have our inside of our class, and notice the name of the class matches what we name the file. It's very important that you can see up here this says it's car.cs and the class name is car. It's very important that those are the same. As soon as you create a script, you need to make sure that you name the script so that it then puts that name in as the class name. If you try changing this, like right now, if I call this like car2 and I try to save this, it's going to break everything because the names don't match. So it's very important that those names are the same. Inside the class, I have a start method. This function runs as soon as the script loads, and this only runs once. Then we have the update method. This one runs once per frame. So you can see right there, update is called once per frame. So this is where our action is. So this is where we want to start coding for the car. Okay, so in the update, I'm going to put in this code float translation. That is the name of my variable, translation, because when you're sliding an object forward, backwards, you're translating it. You may be familiar with that term for geometry. And it's going to give me a float, which is just a decimal. So that's why I'm using the data type float, equals, and then be careful with your capitalization here, input dot with the I capitalized, and then get axis with the G and the A capitalized. And then the axis I'm getting is the vertical, and the V needs to be capitalized on this. And I'll show you where that's coming from in just one second. Let's do our last line here for forward and backwards. So now I need to say transform dot translate. And then translate takes three properties, X, Y, and Z. So I want 0, 0. I'm not moving left or right or up and down, but I'm moving forward and backwards, which is Z. And Z is going to move, well, whatever our translation variable is, so translation. Okay, so your code should look like this. Be careful with your capitalization. Make sure everything's capitalized correctly. So let's go talk about what this vertical is. So I'm going to save this, go back, and you'll see it'll take a second for it to reload the script once I've made changes. So if I go up to the Edit menu and go down to Project Settings, by default this is usually collapsed. So if you go to Project Settings, go to Input Manager, you're going to see something that looks like this, and then Expand Axis. And we can see we have a horizontal axis and a vertical axis. The one that we just did was vertical, so if I expand vertical, I can see that the up and down arrows, as well as the S and the W, are already assigned to the vertical axis. So that's why I'm using that one. That way in our game, somebody could drive forward and backwards using either the up and down arrows or the S and the W. If I wanted to change that, maybe make that like T and G, I could do that. I don't know why you would, but you could. You can assign whatever keys you want to these. So that's where that name verticals come from. And then obviously to go left and right, we're going to end up using the horizontal axis, which is the left, right, A, and D. All right, so if we try running this right now, it's not going to do anything. If I hit play, which is this little button right up here at the top, and press my arrow keys, oops, actually it did because I was messing around. I already assigned this. It shouldn't have. Let me get rid of this because we have not done this step yet. So now if I run this, there we go. It's not doing anything. And the reason for that is because we haven't actually assigned the script to the car. So to assign the script to the car, all you have to do is just drag the script and drop it on the car here, or you can drop it on the car up in the hierarchy. Either one, doesn't matter. And then over here on our car properties, we can see we now have this script object like I accidentally had before I deleted it. Now that it's there, it should work. So if I hit play and use my arrow, the car is going to fly forward and backwards very, very fast. We're going to have to adjust that. And the reason it's doing this because it's trying to move it like every single frame, which is a little fast. We're going to slow that down to just once per second. Your view might not look exactly like mine, your game view. If it doesn't, and you can check this by looking at scene and game, if these do not match, all you have to do, click on your camera, get the scene looking the way you want it to look, so kind of get everything set up with the camera just behind your car exactly the way you want it. Then with the camera selected, go up to game object, go down to align with view, and now the camera is going to be seeing the same thing you do in the scene, and then when you switch back and forth between these two, they should match. Alright, so let's go back and slow down our car and also add in our rotation. So going back to our script, which should still be open. If you closed out of it, just double click on it here again. To slow it down a little bit, so it's only going like once per second, I'm going to do times time with capital T, delta time with a lowercase d but then a capital T. And this is going to slow it down to once per second. But if I save this and go back, we're actually going to see that that's now too slow. Give it a second to reload. There we go. So if I play it, okay, it's slowed down, but now it's too slow. So what I can do now is throw in something like, let's say maybe like 7F. Now, oops. So our line looks something like this now. So it's going to be get vertical axis, whatever that is, positive or negative. Up arrow is positive, down arrow is negative, times 7F, which is a float. That's why I have to put the F there, because this is a float. So I need to put the F indicating this is a float. Otherwise, if I just do this, it's an integer, and it's not going to like the fact that I am using integers in here. So I'm going to do 7F times delta time, and that should now give me a fairly reasonable speed. Now, depending on your obstacles and the size of your car and size of your obstacles and all that, you may need to adjust that 7. But there we go. We can see that it's fairly reasonable. Might need to speed it up a little bit, but it gives us a good starting point. So let's do the rotation now. So for rotation, it's going to be very similar. Float rotation equals input dot get axis, and you can probably guess which axis we want for this one. Horizontal with a capital H. Same thing, I'm going to multiply by, and now for rotation, I found that something like 100 is a good starting point. You can adjust that up or down depending on your likes for your game. But then I also want to do the time.delta time again. Then transform dot rotate. Same thing, 3 properties. Rotation is going to be around the y-axis, so this is going to be 0, and then whatever our rotation variable is coming from that horizontal axis, and then z is also 0. Okay, and make sure we don't have any spelling errors. Looks like everything's right. That R should be capitalized. This one's not because that's coming from here, so it all looks good. So let's save this, go back, let the script reload, and then play this, and now we should be able to drive forward and rotate. And I am not able to because I have an error, and my error is horizontal is not a sub, and that's probably because I misspelled horizontal. I looked at my capitalization, and sure enough, I left the T out of horizontal. Way to go. Okay, let's try that. There we go, that looks better. And now I can rotate. One last step for this video. Obviously, this isn't overly useful as far as not being able to really see my car as it drives off the screen. It'd be nice if my camera would follow the car. So, to get the camera to follow the car, all we have to do is come up here to our hierarchy, find the main camera, drag it and drop it on top of the car so it becomes a child of the car. And we can see now that the car has a little arrow beside it that we can expand, and we can see that the main camera is now a part of the car, which means as the car moves, so will the camera. So if I try this, okay, now we can test it and see if we can drive forward and left to right, and sure enough, we can. and the camera follows us, making it a lot easier now to tell where we're going as we're trying to avoid our obstacles. One last thing. I said we only have one last thing. Let's do one more thing. We don't fall off the road, and that's because we don't have any gravity. So let's go ahead and add gravity in this video as well. So to add gravity, all I need to do is select my car object, come over here to add component underneath the properties, the very last option there, and start typing in rigid, and you'll see rigid body and rigid body 2D. We're not doing a 2D game, we're doing 3D, so we want the regular rigid body. And you can see that with rigid body, my car now has a mass and it uses gravity. So now, let's see what happens when we drive off the road. First thing we're going to notice is since the car is sitting a little bit above the road, notice how it just dropped down and dropped onto the road. And then if I go and I drive off the road, and there we go, I fall off because I now have gravity. All right, that's it for this video. Now, next video we'll add obstacles and start adding a scoring system.